What an introduction, but it's nice to be back home in some sort of shape or form. I'm not going to be talking about coin things, I'm afraid, so I apologise for that. So if you want to exit stage left, that's your cue. I'm going to talk about the really important thing, I think, which is customers and how they consume technology and how we can develop innovation that actually makes sense and creates a market and gives use back to our customers. Because whilst financial innovation continues, really how much is actually relevant to our customers. And so I'll start off with sort of almost like a quick once in a time, if you'll forgive me. If I said that Jersey is the home of European e-commerce today, and I've mentioned this to a couple of people I've spoken to, there's generally glazed looks. But ironically, 24 years ago, almost to the day, we launched the Wine Warehouse from our offices in Broad Street, which was Europe's first online shop. Most of the customers, ironically, came from Guernsey because it allowed them to buy wine. And the supply and demand, because that's very important in every business, was controlled by Jersey Telecom, who allowed us to have, not really with their knowledge, 4 14K4 modems plugged into their telephone network to allow people to dial into this new shop. And so our distribution was relatively limited because, of course, there was the cost to Jersey Telecoms of making the phone call. And then the hour-and-a-half wait for a graphic to arrive on your computer of a bottle of wine. In between times, of course, the network would go down. You'd have to go through the wailing cat syndrome to reconnect your modem, and it was generally not a great time, but of course 24 years on, you've now got one of the best networks in the world, which you should be very, very proud of, which I'm also proud that Jersey Telecoms has paid for and that they didn't come tapping at my door for. The final point on that story is my introduction to them as an organisation, I guess, to the States of Jersey, was a little letter pointing out to me quite politely that I was breaking the Jersey Telecoms island legal legislation, for which I could go to jail for 6 months. Given the customer support challenges that we had, I was waiting for somebody to knock at the door and drag me off so I could have a rest. But you know, you do have a strong legacy. And as David sort of hinted at, that little shop, the Wine Warehouse, led then to 1995 to us building Berkeley Square from here, which was the world's first bank-endorsed e-commerce shopping mall, which Jim Clark of Netscape visited the island. You had quite a few interesting people here, and led on to the creation of WorldPay, and actually us running the Diana Memorial Fund in 1997 from Broad Street. So there's been quite a few interesting milestones that have occurred from here, and I'm really personally looking forward to more of them, because I think with the fibre network you've now got, you have the opportunity. You've just got to do the innovation bit, which of course is the easy bit, he says. So what sort of happened after we sort of built this little shop and all the rest of it, and what's been going on in the world? So this is a little tour through. You know, we talk about e-commerce and all the rest of it quite lightly, and everybody says, well, it's here now, we use it all the time, we go online shopping and all the rest of it. But that's really just part of the story. The way that the market is changing, the way that we consume online services is changing dramatically. And the impact the internet had on financial services is only just starting to be understood some 24 years on, which is when, I guess, the commercial internet arrived. Some of the early adopters were travel companies, the airlines, and all the rest of it. And it's quite stunning that, you know, I could stand here, take my smartphone out, book a flight to go across to see Satya Nadella in Redmond now, but I can't make a bank transfer to Redmond that will arrive before I fly back. There's some real areas that just haven't caught up. And one of the things that the internet created was a whole change in the way that our customers communicate and interact with us. It became demand-driven rather than supply-driven. What I mean by that is all of our customers could ask us all of the time for everything, whether we could supply that or not. Historically, before the arrival of digital services, most of us used to transact within a 30-mile radius of where we lived. Obviously not here, because you'd have been in the sea. In the UK, that sort of applies. And so the change to be able to access all of this data, access shopping, do all of these things from the convenience of your home, from your car, wherever you happen to be, has changed all of those buying habits. And it's going to continue on as we continue to choose to consume in a way that is easier for us. All right? And that's us as consumers, not as business people. The impact that has then in relation to our businesses and all the rest of it is to rapidly change the dynamics of the interaction between a business and its customers. And if you look at then how people are going to come and connect to us, connectivity and all of the rest of it, and how the market is changing, you know, we've just shown a little graph, massive growth in e-commerce and all the rest of it. You know, at ClearBank, we have a project going on at the moment in relation to connected cars. You know, we will have potentially 110,000 cars enabled with banking technology in 2020 where you can pay for things in your car. Why not? And so the whole marketplace isn't just about e-commerce. It's the application now of the Internet of Things, device connectivity, a whole raft of new opportunities to transform or disintermediate, depending upon which word you choose to take, in relation to all of those different areas. You know, has Jersey, has St Helier become a smart city because of your investment in fibre? There's a strong argument it may well be on the way there. Industrial IoT, probably not. Connected health, massive opportunity here to hook up all of your doctors and hospitals and do that efficiently and have on-home consultations using the fibre network linked to the smart homes. Connected cars we've touched on. Wearables, just out of interest, anybody in the room with a wearable? You see that's working already. Smart utilities, well, I've just given enough praise to Jersey Telecoms, that's over and done with. And of course, there are the others that we have yet to think about. But then if we think, how do we actually then connect to all of these organizations in relation to consuming them, that's all changing as well, because the amount of compute power that we have in our pockets is so great compared to what it was 2 years ago, and substantially greater than when we were in Broad Street working with an organization called Cellnet, sending one of the first SMS messages to a guy at Barclays Bank telling him that he'd won the lottery. And it took him 3 days to work out what the envelope on the phone meant. But desktop was the way we used to consume. Multi-platform and mobile is where we're moving to. And David has got, you know, huge respect for the work that Safaricom did in Kenya with M-Pesa, which has been mobile only from day one. And so they jump all of the issues that we face. And I think it's interesting that Binance announced this morning that they're going to be in Uganda. I suspect what they're trying to do is to do a playback to create a crypto version of M-Pesa in that marketplace, but time will tell. But the platforms are changing, the consumption's changing, and these are our customers choosing to access our services, whatever they may be, in a way that is appropriate and comfortable to them. So, you know, when we go and start talking about customers, whether, you know, I'm chairman of a UK clearing bank, which 24 years ago I would never have thought would happen, but anyway, who are they? And that isn't that their name is John Doe, it's who really are they? How do we trust them? How do we know what they're doing? How can we allow them to have power and control to do financial transactions on their own without us interfering with them? And how are they paying? You know, what barriers are we putting in place in relation to how they pay, how they consume their financial services, and how they pay for things that they actually want to buy and should be allowed to buy? Because there's a big wake-up call for banks, that banks are custodians of their customers' money. It's actually not their money. And so there's a major change going on at the moment in relation to how control and custody of money is held in banks. And I think that will end up being a benefit to consumers. And then finally, what really are their expectations when they've gone through all of this process, when, you know, we worked out who they are and whatever, what are their expectations at the end of the day in relation to a transaction or service that they're looking to potentially consume? So who they are, this morning we had a lot of discussion about KYC, AML, all of that fun subjects. I see the eyes glazing over it already. This isn't about that. This is about how we deal with that and how we deal with that effectively. And identity, being able to identify your customers, is very, very, very important. David's been going about identity being the new norm for years and years. It is now a norm. And if you are building any financial services and you're not embedding cognitive services either of your own or by way of a partnership now, then very soon you will have to. All right? My expectation is that cognitive services will become part of the Basel Supervisory Committee recommendations in 2020 in relation to minimum requirements from banks in relation to cybersecurity, cybercrime, and AML requirements. So that one is coming down the line, and it's great fun. It's really super, because what you've got in that is the ability to deliver a service to your customer which helps you identify them. You may give them discounts or something from that, but in a way now that they choose. You know, we did a lot of early work on voice biometrics, speech works, vision works, vein biometrics work phenomenally well. Within our banking environments, every single transaction is authorized using vein biometric technology. We don't need to have a list of approved people. We just need to have a working hand which has a blood supply running in it. All right? And if they then have to go on their mandatory 2-week leave, fortunately, they take their hand with them. And so we have absolute defined points of when people do various things or authenticate things. And in relation then to some consumer services and whatever, you know, you have the ability to use your smartphone to visually identify yourself, your PC to visually identify yourself. There's a mix between machine learning and AI. Machine learning is actually a little bit quicker sometimes to get running. AI is the silver bullet, I think, that we're moving towards. We have a massive investment in AI. But we don't expect that to deliver meaningful results until the end of 2019, because the data that we're putting into it is new data, and you need to manipulate the data and learn from the data over a protracted period of time, rather than just turning around and say we've turned an AI engine on, and it's actually meaning that we can identify all of our customers. What you can then do with that AI, all right, is let's assume that we're, you know, in Jersey, and the 2:30 in the afternoon got to send a transfer to the UK threshold has miraculously disappeared. Because it is slightly ironic that in the age of the, you know, smart city St Helier, that we still have that lock-off date in relation to transactions to the UK. So effectively, we can authenticate. You know, you go online, you say, I want to send £100 to Nick Ogden in the UK. I say, thank you very much. So you sign for it using your cognitive services, your biometrics. It's authenticated. It goes through the system. And every transaction that's flowing through the financial services network is being looked at in real time by an AI engine. And this isn't next week. This is working today. And we see a transaction which we think is strange. The AI says, this doesn't look as though it's normal. You know, why is Nick sending money to Vietnam? Something like that. And what happens in our world is that the way the technology works in relation to the way that we store our data is everything is a visual object. And we use a technology called HoloLens, which some of you may have heard of. It's a 3D technology. And what it allows our risk clerks to do is to sit at their desk wearing a natty set of glasses, which just work like normal pieces of glasses until an alert is created. And then effectively, an alert will be created. The account that's under investigation will be shown. The authentication will be shown. The interrelationships to that account are shown. Everything's shown on screen, can be drilled down just by a click of a mouse in relation to seeing all the interrelationships in relation to that transaction. And within 30 seconds, that's either going to go straight through as an approved exception or bounce back for further review. So what you're doing by using the identity services and the cognitive services is you're creating an environment where you're changing the workplace, you're improving your customer service, and you're making transaction flow better for your customers, and you're actually de-risking your own business at the same time. Let's get on to we'll talk about money, just, you know, fiat currency at this stage. So what's sort of happening in this space and all the rest of it? I said earlier that financial services have not woken up to the opportunity of the internet, and I really do believe that, notwithstanding the fact that 75% of the world's major banks are changing their IT systems out and replacing them over the course of the next 7 years. So there's a massive change moving. Some of that will be to cloud. We're a cloud-based bank. Some of it may well be to data center. But there's a massive transition going on. While that's going on, there's a significant growth in relation to non-cash transactions, transactions growing electronic, be that contactless. Everybody uses contactless now. Be that through international payments and all the rest of it. The whole market is moving. Right? But the real irony of this is when you start to drill into the way that transaction flows work, moving money around electronically is slower now than it was in 1647 when the Bank of England invented a pound note. Because effectively the digital world that we live in and the emergence of mainframe computing that went into the major global banks in 1960 has slowed down our ability to move money around. And so over the course of the next few years, and again, this is a massive benefit to your customers, this is all going to change to real-time 24/7 by 365 payment flows in multi-currency environments. What that means is that, if I'm sitting in Jersey and I want to make a payment for, my electricity bill for my house in France, I can do that from my Jersey bank account into the French supplier and know in 300 milliseconds that they have been paid. Because today there are no service levels in transactional banking. And we're probably one of the only industries in the world that is allowed to get away with that. When I was coming down to the airport yesterday to fly across to Jersey, there was an advert on from British Gas saying, if you are worried about when the gas engineer is going to arrive, you can download our app. And it will tell you whether you have enough time to go to the corner shop, buy some more milk so that you can give our engineer a cup of coffee when he arrives. Right? You try doing that with a SWIFT transaction, and the milk will have gone off. Right? So this is all changing very, 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 very rapidly. All right? And in relation to services and technologies and systems that you'll be innovating from here, you need to be aware of these changes and how these changes will impact on you and provide better services and capability for your customers. The customer experience. Where do we go to? And it's interesting, this slide was up, or a similar version of this slide was up earlier on as well, is that when you're creating new technology, I remember when we started here with the internet, we thought it was fantastic. The Jersey Evening Post, we went to 28.8K modems, headline on the front page, the information superhighway arrives. I mean, that was just before the chasm. And what you have when you're developing new technologies and moving forward into the market, you do have this curve. Right? But Jersey, as the earlier video just showed, I think it's got a major opportunity because in relation to the demographics you have here and the island environment that you have here, the ability to go and test technology, be that hardware in relation to the infrastructure you've got here, or be that soft solutions in relation to allowing people to experiment with different banking, different methods of payment, different interactions on social media, is unique because you can get quite a quick cross-sectional view across all the demographics almost uniquely here. Why do I say that? I know it because in 1992, before the arrival of a product called Mondex, which arguably was the precursor of contactless, that was trialled here in the Channel Islands in Jersey. So opportunity abounds, all right? And sometimes when you look at that and you set an island, you say, well, it's really great, but how do we get this working? Because the distribution challenge kills customers. We have a limited marketplace here, of 110,000 people. That's quite hard to actually take a startup and create something that makes value. But the technologies and services and systems that you can build here and develop here are easily exportable once you prove their viability. And so distribution should not be a challenge in relation to being an export technologies and systems that you grow here based upon the customer experience that you garner from your research here. And research and market testing in the UK is very difficult. We've done some in relation to holding focus groups and whatever, but they tend to be very, very fine, and you're limited to the number of people that you can get. I remember when we ran the Internet Roadshow, way back, we had about, I think, 1,500 people over a week come to look at stuff we're doing. There's an appetite here to see what's going on, and you should capitalize on it. The other thing I think you need to, everybody recognizes is that most startups change tack. And that's not a bad thing, but the initial customer engagement and the work you do in engaging with your customers is vitally important. And customers, you will find, always prefer red to green. This is the way it goes. And so the more that you can do in relation to testing the market, testing with real customers, which you're able to do here, the better. And as I mentioned earlier, society, I think, has substantially changed. We do live in a society of instant gratification. Everything is new and everything is old in the same second. We consume news like this, and everything in relation to our social understandings and whatever is changing dramatically. And if you go to restaurants, as I'm certain you do, I find it personally very sad to see a family of people sat around a table all on their smartphones and actually failing to have a thing called a conversation, which I think at some stage will probably be removed from the Oxford Dictionary. So finally, to get back to, I guess, where innovation is and everything else, who will be your customers when you actually go to market? Who are the customers for the new digital jersey? Well, they're actually already here. You just haven't talked to them. You haven't gone to approach them, and you haven't found them. And one of the things I'm urging Tony and the guys at Digital Jersey to look at is how we can exploit this and use this as a very, 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 very valuable asset on our smart island. You need to stand up and take your own and your competitors' tech apart, because all tech can be replaced and changed and copied. That's the way it works. And you need to accept that you need to collaborate. Our investment at ClearBank in cybersecurity with our partners Microsoft is in excess of $1 billion a year, because that's how much we need to spend. And that actually isn't enough money. But without that support from Microsoft, we would be completely vulnerable. And so you need to collaborate. You need to plan to engage with your future customers quickly to get early adoption. And remember that market education is time-consuming and expensive. And when we were in Broad Street, we had one employee who still works for us, worked all the way through the last 24 years, Mrs. Smith, who lives at 3 Acacia Gardens. And when we finished doing our little, this is what we're going to do, and we all got very, excited about it, we asked her. And if Mrs. Smith of 3 Acacia Gardens understands what you're trying to get her to do and likes it, you've got a fighting chance. Thank you.